Our guest today is a guy that's had a big impact on me as a peer at a younger time in my life. We were both younger. We were floating on a river in Texas at one time in a kayak, the two of us. And he was, I remember he was sitting behind me, so I can't really see what's happening behind me. And we were talking about our identity and the call in our lives. And he said something that has stuck with me. And he said, "Rob, you're an architect of hope." And that stuck with me because there's two parts to that. One was I would aspire to be that, but also the architect part, a builder, someone that would construct things and dream up structures and scaffolding for people to find hope at the end of the day is something that landed with me. But before we introduce him, I wanted to read you just a little piece from my book, Whole Leaders Wild Trust, that feels relevant to as we begin this conversation. So here we go. Building bold, wild trust in the middle of our real and human brokenness demands self-awareness within us, life-giving patterns between us, and courageous systems around us. Systems strong enough to carry trust through generations. This is the whole story of leaders. This is what it means to build wild, life-changing trust. We trust a courageous mission when it comes from a leader with the courage to lift the veil, to be both visible and vulnerable. Not performative vulnerability, but sacrificial courage, the kind that costs something. We will trust a mission that refuses to sacrifice service and love for the sake of a buck. A mission that confronts self-interest with other interest, that asks not, what can we gain, but for whose sake are we doing this? Vulnerability requires great courage because it is inherently unsafe. And trust grows in that tension where leaders are courageous enough to let others see them, not because it's strategic, but because it's necessary. And contrary to popular belief, vulnerability is not the foundation of trust. Sacrificial courage is. The courage to change for someone else's sake. The guts to edit who you are for the benefit of those you lead. No qualifiers, no expected return, just editing. And that is the raw foundation of trust. And I thought of this particular piece because our guest today has taught me a lot about vulnerability and also about brokenness, quite frankly, and about what it means to embrace it, understand it, and shed light on it in a way that actually means something. So, Sab?
Let's get this wild conversation going. Welcome to the Wild Conversation, where human being and human doing converge, reshaping the world of leadership, culture, and performance. Today, we get to have a wild conversation with Matt Russell. Dr. Russell is a practical theologian, social entrepreneur, and the co-founder of Iconoclast Artists, the Houston-based program empowering youth to reclaim their stories through creative writing and spoken word. He also co-leads projectCURATE, a leadership and community development initiative that equips diverse leaders to navigate the cultural and spiritual challenges of our time with wisdom and courage. With more than 2 decades of pastoral experience in Texas and the United Kingdom, Matthew blends deep spiritual insight with grounded, disarming authenticity. His PhD in practical theology from Texas Tech University explored how storytelling becomes a pathway to healing, a theme that runs through all his work. At his core, Matthew's a builder of people and communities. Through Iconoclast and projectCURATE, he's helped thousands find their voice, confront their pain, and imagine new possibilities for their lives and neighborhoods. We're honored to welcome Dr. Matthew Russell to the Wild Conversation. Matt, thanks for being here.
It's an honor. It's really an honor to be here. And Rob, what you read earlier, man, I've got to get that book. No, it's fantastic. I loved it when I read it, and hearing you pull out that piece, it's fantastic, and it's really what's needed, I think, in our culture and world today. So it's an absolute joy to be with y'all.
Thanks, Matt.
we're going to play a quick round of wild cards before we jump into more of the wild conversation. We have a deck of 52. Each has a different question on it. And I just pulled 10. I don't know exactly which questions are what. So we're just going to pick a number between 1 and 10. I'll go first, pick a number, answer. We can answer from our gut, what in 2 words, or if a story comes to mind. And then Matt, you'll go next, and Rob will round us out. Today, I'm going to choose number 9. Okay, it says, what important details on your agenda are a part of your bigger purpose? This is a fun question. Just this morning, a friend literally asked me, texted and said, what's on your agenda for today? And so it was really helpful. I, in response to her, made my list of things that need to get done. And so that goes from like a team meeting that we just got to have, to this amazing podcast recording, to doing laundry and doing email responding, and all of those things, when they're jumbled up, feel like I just need to get them done. But when they're intentional on a list, they're each a part of my bigger purpose for today. So I would say all of those things for different reasons. And I'm thankful for friendships who ask. All right, Matt, pick a number.
7.
7. Who in your life or work needs your encouragement today?
Oh, wow. Who in my life or work needs my encouragement? I think my oldest son probably needs my encouragement. We're going on a trip together, and he's feeling a little bit anxiety about it, but also super stoked about it as well. And so I think just being present to what he's experiencing and giving him what he needs in that space is what I'm called to do today. So
That's good. Thank you. Rob?
8.
All right. Ooh, you're going right in the middle. Okay. 1, 2, let's see if I can count. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. What was a humbling experience that made you stronger?
Oh. Who wrote these cards? I think I ask that every time.
That's cracking up, which is what I love also.
you want me to answer that for you? We should answer these for each other.
We should for each other.
That is a
Okay.
good version.
All right, we're going back. We're going back.
Oh
to
my word. I think the funny thing about this, I'm not going to process this too deeply, is like humbling experiences as I think about them are not fun when they're happening.
No.
Yeah.
So this is such a hindsight thing, right? About like so yeah, in hindsight, it made me stronger, but would I want to go through it again? No.
Yeah. That's why humiliation and humility are really connected,
Mm.
Yeah. Well, the root, right, is like from the dirt. And humanness, by the way, Matt. All right. So I would say this is such a, I've told this story before, but I think it's just the most obvious example historically, because I got things going on right now some of them I haven't been through enough to see how it made me stronger yet, if you know what I mean. Like we're all dealing with these things in the present. But I think one of the moments that comes up is I did not pass my comprehensive exams when I went, and it's not, some people are like, oh, you didn't pass your comprehensive exams, but it was like that was so much of my identity when I, as a young man, was tied up, and that's what I was supposed to do, was to do a PhD, and then and I failed, and I was one of the hardest times of my life, especially career wise, because I didn't know what the future held.
Yes.
If I didn't continue with that, I don't have a second best option, and it was tough, but in hindsight, I think it developed a conviction and a resilience in me to handle really difficult failures, personal failures, that did make me stronger. And I think there were certain things about my own identity I needed to establish. And it's weird how a crucible like that, in a little crucible, really had an effect on me. So there's lots of others, but that was one that comes to mind career-wise. So
Thank you.
Sabbath, wow.
Good
Thanks
stuff.
a lot.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anytime. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. That's great.
You'll know not to pick number 8 next time.
It's my favorite number. Said that before because it looks like a snowman. So I don't know. Man, Matt, do you remember that time on the river?
I do. Like it was yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. Was that the Frio River? I think it was.
Frio River.
I remember
at
correct.
the HEB Foundation.
Yeah, that's right.
at
That's right.
the Laity Lodge camp, which
The
is
Lady Lodge Camp. That's right.
phenomenal.
I have a story I have to tell really quickly about that I think I've told you about. Do you remember we went on a hike together
Uh-huh.
and with a bunch of other guys, and we were crossing over a dam. It was a very small dam, but it was about 18 inches wide. And you probably don't even remember because every guy went straight across. And all it was you walked across the top of it, and you can imagine there's kind of a gulch on one side. On the other side, the water from this pond or lake is like 6 inches below the top of the dam. And you had
Okay.
we were walking across the dam. So we're on this hike, and everybody went across that dam. And it was they just walked right across it. And as it got more to the center of it as you walked across. So imagine there's water right there. So you could just jump in the water and be fine. And it was a hot day, so you could do that.
Yeah.
But on the right side, there was a gulch that probably got to 40 or 50 feet high. So one side, jump in the water, be safe. Other side, fall off and die or be maimed pretty seriously. Every guy went across that thing. I got halfway out there. You don't even remember this, do you? I got halfway out there and got completely froze because it entered my mind, if I fall off here, and I'm like, how? And I'm sitting there going, and so I got down on my knees and I crawled backwards across that dam. And then I went down and I hiked through the gulch, and you guys waited for me for about 20 minutes.
I don't remember any of that.
Isn't that great? It's one of them. It's like this profound memory for me. I don't know. It's funny that you don't even remember. I've never even told you that story. And I was so like ashamed that I'm like, why did these guys, they're scared? But heights kind of bother me, especially when I started thinking about what this could do. Anyway, that's not how I thought we were going to start, but that's yeah.
That's why I don't remember. I mean, I remember the trip. I remember being on the kayak or the canoe with you in the Frio River, but I don't remember that.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a pretty interesting moment for me. There's a whole trust story in that too. So
Yeah.
well, Matt, will you start off by just describing your work with Iconoclast and projectCURATE? Because I would like people to understand it. It was in your intro, and I'd love to know a little bit more. Can you describe those things?
Yes, I can. I think the core of that, it doesn't make any sense to me outside of being a pastor of a local church and really being invested in both the congregation I'm in, the neighborhood that I live in, and the city that I live in. And when both of these organizations emerged, when I got back I did a postdoc in England for a couple of years, and when I stepped back into the church, was really seeing a deficit within the life of the church in terms of how it engaged with certain types of people and populations. So Iconoclast emerged out of a relationship that I have with an El Salvadorian immigrant that's just probably one of the most talented people I've ever known in my life, both as a spoken word poet and as a hip hop dancer. He spent. I mean, if you just Google the Red Bull breakdancing, his stuff and his team is all, I mean, they've won the national and the worlds all the time in that stuff. So he came to me and said, hey, I really am caring. I want to do something about these schools. And so we started and it started with an idea, and we began to kind of we wrote down some things over a lunch on a napkin that actually 15 years in is been really crazily successful. And we are in, I really wanted to see from my standpoint, if Jesus were to rock into Houston, Texas, my hunch is that he would not show up and I know that youth groups and churches are really important, but he'd be asking the question of where are needy kids? And he might go there first before he came to my church's youth group. And the way that we've conceived youth work or youth groups in the 21st century in America is that it really is the members' kids. And what do we do with we've got members and then we've got their kids. And so the youth group is really about the members' kids. My thought is that that's one way of looking at it. That I was raised in a youth group. A part of my faith and formation and malformation has been in that space too. But I wondered if Jesus were to come into the city of Houston, where would he go first? And so we began a creative writing program that really wanted to create community within public schools, F and D rated schools. And so and then to ask the church to give a damn about the kids that would never show up to their church? And so
Mm,
could we do a reverse way to where the folks in the church were caring about kids in these neighborhoods that were barely hanging on economically, socially, academically, and all measures? And so that's what we have been doing. So we've got a curriculum. We've got 900 students that are involved every week. We're on our 7th or 8th book of poetry. The Houston Museum of Fine Arts underwrites it every year, and we release a book of student poetry. And we usually have anywhere from 200 to 700 folks show up to that. And
mm.
we offer scholarships and academic and also kind of entrepreneurial kind of granting to that as well for the students. So, yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. And
Yeah.
then what about projectCURATE?
projectCURATE really then also emerged out of the moment we were in culturally a few years ago when there was a ton of unaccompanied minors that were coming up through Mexico into Houston, and really asking the question that Jesus asked, who is your neighbor? Who's my neighbor? And as one of my favorite theologians, Bono, says that distance does not determine who and who is not your neighbor. So my neighbor is
Mm,
not just a person in proximity to me. The neighbor is the person in need. And as a lot of Catholic theologians have kind of instructed Protestants, that often Jesus is found on the margins.
mm,
Curate was a response to saying, what would it look like for Houston to involve itself in places of improbable friendships where people shouldn't meet, but end up meeting, and it changes everything for both of them,
mm,
right? So it's not a transactional sense of, a lot of times I think most churches really do a great job of service. They ask the question, where are hungry people? Where does education fall behind? And what do we do about that?
mm.
Rarely does it ask the question of justice, which is, why are people hungry? Why is there two educational systems, right?
Yeah.
I think that the movement towards a more mature spirituality has to move us to those kinds of questions, or we stay in a real transactional mode with people.
Wow. Okay. And what would you say, what's been the most fulfilling part of that work in either space? Like for you personally?
Okay, so that there's like an organizational I love starting
Uh-huh.
stuff, and I love
Yeah.
entrepreneurial things, and I love thinking about like what doesn't exist and what could exist, and then just like freaking rolling the dice because it shouldn't work, you know?
Uh-huh.
And then it working, but not working, number one, in the way you thought it was going to be, because then you kind of throw everything out. But then it works in this way as people get involved and shape it from their own space and giftings. It works in this amazing way that is collaborative and redemptive and seems super kingdom oriented, all
Oh,
that stuff, you know? Uh,
yeah.
I love doing those things.
Okay. Okay. I know that about you. I know that about you. And by the way, like for our listeners, if you want a little insight into me and Matt, is that Matt was one of my friends that actually this is kind of overstated, but it's kind of not. Taught me how to hug another man and also to tell him that I love him. And so those are things that have a peer of yours who mentored you into things that were not natural for you. And so even my friends, Matt, who didn't know you, started to see a difference in me because of you. So we have a lot of places we're gonna go. I want to kick it out. Let's dig into some data for just a second.
Let's go.
And then I want to take it where it goes. We can go off road if we're both comfortable with. But I know you had a chance to read our State of Trust at Work report and to see some of that. What were two or three of the sound bites that stood out to you as important things that were notable?
Part of what I've been involved in my life, and you've helped me with this, is to know that, oh, I'm an innovator.
Mm,
I come alive in innovative spaces,
mm-hmm.
right? Like I actually, like, part of my soul dies if you saddle me with 90% of my job being management of something and don't give me any put a lot of parameters around that. So
Yeah.
I think like one of the things I was really interested in terms of kind of, I think it falls under the like some of the business imperative, but like the increased innovation that happens with trust makes me, and thinking about risk taking within that space,
Yeah.
I found that to be like really helpful to me and exciting to realize is that often in the language that you've helped me see is that I am creating contexts and collaborative spaces of trust so that innovation can be expressed.
Yeah, that's very interesting. One of the common questions I'll ask, I'll ask some form of this question with doesn't matter, an organizational leader, could be a business leader, could be a pastor, it doesn't matter. And I'll ask them, so what does trust have to do with the performance and well-being of your people right now
Yeah.
in your organization? And the most common thing that I hear, Matt, is the word is everything. Like it's fascinating because you know me well enough to know I didn't set out to be a trust guy. That wasn't my goal. My goal was I wanted to develop whole leaders.
Uh-huh.
And then when this whole trust conversation to open up and you start to realize and you really think about trust. So you start to define it.
Building trust in your business starts with being able to measure it so that you can create a pathway for change. Our Wild Trust Index measures the drivers of trust at the personal, team, and organizational levels. We are building the largest database on the drivers of trust inside of organizations. This survey will inform growth imperatives and the necessary organizational change needed to fuel that growth. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform, and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.
And we had to define it. What is trust? What does that mean? And then they all will say everything. Nothing happens without trust. It's not even, and it's often described as a currency.
Yes.
But it's more than a currency, because currency is what we exchange.
Yes.
We don't exchange anything without trust. So I don't even know, it's beneath, it's the foundation of every exchange
Yes.
that occurs. Like I don't leave my house. In fact, I don't go back in my house without trust.
No, that's right. Right. Well, even when you think about it developmentally and you think about Erik Erikson's kind of notion of that from an interpersonal kind of developmental stage, I mean, that's the first stage.
Yeah.
Trust versus mistrust.
Yeah.
Can I trust the environment? Can I trust this? Even it's a pre-verbal. It's before you even put the word trust to it. You're building that capacity, or that capacity is being threatened.
Yeah. So let me try something out on you that's in that report, and I'm curious about your take on this. Is that we did some studies. So if you look at, there's a wild trust quadrant in there that we describe. It's a 2x2.
Okay.
And high organizational trust. So I trust my leaders, my organization, and then high team trust would be the high to the right. That'd be the ideal, right? I'm trusting my leaders and the organization that surrounds me, and I trust my team members. And so we call that a stronghold. And then if both of those things are low, we call that a jungle. And so we help organizations see where they land in that quadrant. And then if they trust their team members, but they don't trust their organization, we call that islands of trust. Then if they trust their organization and their leaders, their senior leaders, but they don't trust their team members, who's in the foxhole with them, that's what we call a shell of trust. It's like an egg. It's firm on the outside, but messy on the inside. That makes sense. And so we did some research to go a little deeper on organizations that landed in the stronghold. And I want to get into this, Matt, with you just to hear your thoughts. Organizations that landed in the stronghold. So they've got high team trust scores. Team members in their organization are trusting each other. They trust the leaders and the organization that surrounds them.
Mm-hmm.
So we looked at organizations that landed there to look at what percentage of individuals in those organizations are in the jungle. Does that make sense?
Yes. So you have a high organizational stronghold, but you have members that are in the jungle that would rate themselves in the jungle.
We were interested. What percentage are in the jungle?
Interesting. Okay.
You know what it was?
I have no idea.
42%. And I was like, first of all, overall in the study, about 48% plus are in the jungle overall. So when I saw that data, I was kind of struck by people are struggling. Do you know what I'm saying? Like in the workplace, no matter what kind of workplace, like overall across our sample, across different industries and ministries and nonprofits.
Building trust in your business starts with being able to measure it so that you can create a pathway for change. Our Wild Trust Index measures the drivers of trust at the personal, team, and organizational levels. We are building the largest database on the drivers of trust inside of organizations. This survey will inform growth imperatives and the necessary organizational change needed to fuel that growth. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform, and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.
That half of the people are functioning in a daily space in the jungle. And that was a big deal to me because I've been there.
Yes.
And it was like one of the worst career moments of my life. You know what I mean? Like I'd say life moments. It's like I couldn't breathe. And so I felt this for those people. But now this other piece of data where the way people treat trust is so often like it's a light switch, like it's ubiquitous, like if it's somewhere, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's just not true. Like brokenness is everywhere, even in the strongholds.
Yes.
And you've talked to me about brokenness often over our lifetime. Like, how do you make sense out of that? This reality that we got work to do. And we all have fractures of trust. You know what I mean? Even in the best places.
Yes. 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 I mean, I think I wonder if the whole of the human journey is a movement towards either trust or a deep, isolated suspicion. Because trust engenders relationship, right?
Yeah. Yep.
You cannot have trust without relationship. I think this is for whatever reason, one of the stories in this time of my life that I've been really thinking about is the summoning of Peter who's on the boat to step out of the boat onto something that is unsustainable, right? Kierkegaard would call this the leap of faith, because most of our trust is really, I think, established in a desire for certainty and a desire for assurances. But to move towards that kind of radical trust that you study and that you're looking at engenders this liminal space where you're going to have to take a leap, right? There has to be a place of safety within yourself, that you've done your own work, so to speak, so that you can take a deep risk. I think another word for faith is just risk. That you can risk in a way forward that belies the fact that you're not in control, that things are uncertain, that you don't know the outcomes, all the things that as human beings we want, all the things that psychologists would say that sits at the core of us, right? And so in many ways we have to, and this really is the only way to write a different story, is to betray the story we've been handed in some ways, because that kind of trust feels like a betrayal to I can't trust this person. I can't do this, right? When everything says, when you hear Yahweh saying to Abraham, take your one child, your only child, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is irreducible. You have to do this if you're going to grow.
We had on Amy Edmondson, the mother of psychological safety. So she's a Harvard professor, and she published an article in 1999, a research paper, and it gave birth to that phrase, psychological safety. And then she didn't publish a book, I don't think, until 2016. And when she came on the podcast, it was fascinating because she said trust is a choice. And it's a choice to trust someone who is untrustworthy. It's a big statement that feels so contrary to the way our world thinks about the concept of trust. Is like you either have it or you don't. Or we talk about how like you can lose it fast. You know what I mean? That's so common. Like everybody says that you can lose it fast. And I'm like, well, yeah, but people have short memories, so you can build it back fast too. There's sometimes, but it's like when she said that, like this very human reality that at some level we all have fragmentation in our trustworthiness.
Everyone does. To be human is to walk into every relationship you will ever have with fragmentation within your trust process. And to think otherwise is naive.
So how does that work? like in a practical way. I want to know, because it's like you think about these things, you sometimes use different language, but it's like if a leader is saying to me, and I ask them, like, what does trust have to do with this X? And they're like, everything. Then in this reality in our humanity is that we are making choices to step out onto the water when not only do we not know whether the water will support us, we're pretty sure parts of it won't.
Mm. Oh, of course.
So what's the goal? What's the redemptive story in that brokenness of just human functioning together and wellness? And
Yeah. You and I have talked about this in different times, but I think that really trust is a summoning towards deeper relationship.
hmm,
So the
hmm,
long gone, I think, or at least bankrupt, is a time where you have the single autonomous male leader that you trust, right?
hmm,
That you
hmm,
make all the decisions, so I don't have to. And part of the thing that I think humans really fear is a deep sense of freedom,
hmm,
right? That what will you do with your one and only life?
hmm,
Now, and the story, one of the stories that I'm caught up in as well is you can do a number of things with that. You can hedge your bet. You know, this is what the talents, the parable of the talents in the New Testament is about, right? There's 1,000 different things you can do with freedom, right? But there's a sense in which I think that you can have trust outside of relationships. And so I think, first of all, there is developmentally, I think the first half of life is the container that we're building these kinds of sets of trusts in, right? Can I trust the environment? And I think once you get to about the second half of life, you begin to see the deficits of where your configuration of trust is able to take you, and you have to be summoned beyond that space to develop a larger field where you might be able to grow in a different way. And
hmm.
I think that most leaders don't know how to fall apart, because I think that they see it as, and I think that there's a necessary dissent that most people don't want to talk about,
Yeah.
because we have wedded a religion with a capitalistic viewpoint where to be successful is to go left to right and up, but always up. It can be a slow up, it can be a slow increase. But I think that the way all of the stories I'm obsessed with now are stories where there is a summons to a necessary dissent.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I think when you talk about brokenness, when you talk about the, whether it's using the language of Henry Now and the wounded healer.
Mm-hmm.
The word innocence in Latin just means without a wound.
Hmm.
And
That's
you,
fascinating.
and so there is a sense in which leaders cannot be, the leaders I trust in the most don't operate out of an innocence, but out of a healing of a wound that is
Hmm.
both primal and primary for them to deal with.
So that's really interesting. So in the work of Iconoclast and projectCURATE, you often talk about the power of naming stories. I know that identification of those things has been something that you might use different language than that, but I just know that
Mm.
for you, it seems like there's been something important. So tell me a little bit about what you have seen in people when that even that process of kind of calling out the story that has led me here about ourselves, more honesty about our wounds and our hopes. What's going on at the center of rebuilding trust regarding that you have seen
Yeah.
as people begin to see their story differently through poetry, through breakdancing, through study of theology, or an understanding of themselves related to God, or understanding of each other?
I don't think that you can grow beyond your own emotional state unless you're open to what you're talking about, these kinds of dynamics. And so I think that to be able to grow and to repair and to move beyond those things, that there has to be, one, a space of, and I think this woman at Harvard's right, there has to be a place of safety.
Mm.
Judgment, pressure, shame does not work to create context of trust. right?
Mm-hmm.
It's only in a space of deep, graced listening where someone else asks me what else, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a Methodist, and so one of the things that Alcoholics Anonymous took from the Methodists was the questions that they asked in the bands and classes, that small groups that Wesley had set up. And one of those things was the penitent class, and I love the penitent class. The penitent class were all the gamblers and the alcoholics and all the folks that were using their rent money to go gamble. They had a whole class of those folks. That's sort of been the folks I was in. But
Yeah.
they would ask the question in terms of their own repair, to do a moral, fearless inventory of their lives with another person. This
Mm.
began to be the basis of the fourth step in Alcoholics Anonymous, and then the fifth step where you shared that, which the church has bastardized into confession. Because
Mm.
really, what you're doing in that relationship of confession is you're telling the truth, not as a way that, like the Holy Spirit or some kind of, a divine presence flipping on the light going, "Hi, I caught you," but say, tell me the truth about where you're stuck. Because always what it's about is not what it's about. And I can't figure out what it's about when I'm in my own head or in my own body. But when I share that with a brother who's at least as messed up as I am, and this then comes to things you and I have talked about. This is the community of faith, or just the human community. There is something that happens within that relationship where there's a repair. There's more complexity that's more generous. There's an ability to navigate shame in a way that you can't from an individualistic psychological standpoint. There
Yeah.
is distributive power that begins to happen. All the stuff that is around trust.
Yeah. It's fascinating, man. I'd love for your of course, taking my mind in important directions. I think one of the things that when I was telling you that many leaders we work with, if I ask them about trust, they'll say it affects everything. And it was Stephen Covey, when he came on the podcast, he said, you can measure this thing that's more than a feeling. It is more than a feeling, even though it's like air. Like everyone knows, if you can't breathe, you can't function. Well, if you can't trust, you can't function. That's it's like the relational concept of air, right? And when we asked him about what the future holds, and he said you can measure it, because if you can measure increasing speed and decreasing costs, if you can measure those outcomes, if things are going faster, if people are innovating, if you know what I mean, it's like there's ease. People are spending their time working on performing better as opposed to managing relationships. If they're doing those things, speed and costs, speed's going up, costs going down, then you're kind of forward thinking into a measure of trust. And I asked him, what's the future? And he said, we have to understand the drivers, the inputs. And so, and that's what we did was me, I didn't set out to be a trust person. I set out to develop whole leaders. The thing that we tripped on was, that's so important to what you're saying, was we weren't just doing leader development.
Whole Leaders, Wild Trust by Dr. Rob McKenna is now available through major booksellers nationwide. Debuting as a USA Today top 10 national bestseller and number 11 on the Publishers Weekly list. This book, in a cultural moment defined by fractured relationships, disengaged teams, and declining institutional trust, marked a rare achievement for leadership book centered on inner work and trust building. Why does this book matter now? Organizations across sectors are navigating burnout, low engagement, and risking skepticism toward leadership. Dr. McKenna's work offers a research-backed roadmap for leaders seeking to rebuild trust from the inside out. Get your book available now through any major bookseller nationwide.
So I'm getting really practical now, because most leader development is send them to a conference, put them in a training. The difference was that we tripped on was we were developing leader capacity in teams together.
Yes.
And what gave them an entry point into this deeper conversation that included their brokenness, by the way, was some just fundamental things about human functioning at work. So like inviting someone into an assessment of their competence or lack thereof. actually gave them with an invitation to have this conversation together about not only the things that they're good at, but the things that they're not good at. And then putting a methodology around that for increasing vulnerability, like getting people into the shallow end before they get into the deep end of sharing everything. That the scaffolding of different assessments that were about things like motivations and purpose and my competence or lack thereof, and my who's surrounding me, making sure that I've got a strategic support around me in this moment that I'm facing, that those things, when talked about together, started to build trust.
Mm.
And so it didn't even have to be. And the cool thing about workplaces is that on some level, most of us kind of expect that we're going to need to improve our job at work. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of I think most of us think that even if we're not, we kind of believe, yeah, they're probably going to expect me to get better at my job. And so inviting people into some fundamental things about fundamental psychological things and things in practice actually started to build trust. And it wasn't just showing like an invitation to see what's going great, which is what most of the world narrative looks like. Right. You can do anything. You are good at everything. Let's look at your gifts. Let's look at your strengths. And it's like, I don't believe at this point, given our research, that you can actually fully trust someone if they don't know where they're broken.
100%. Yes. And I wonder, this is where, I don't even play a CEO on TV. So this is a different realm than I'm in. But it seems as if the way that the American system has set up these kinds of things is that those kinds of vulnerabilities flow downhill, right? Like it starts by me being a CEO saying, let's talk about your vulnerability. Well, I think that there is, what I'm hearing from you is this grand inversion that it's not, because a lot of times workers can hear this, hey, we're going to do a performance review or a trust review or whatever the flavor of the new term is. But it also feels like I'm being called into a supervisor to hear a couple things that I do good, but here's really what we're here to talk about. And I think because of that, it sets up a space where I'm already walking in defended. And so I wonder about environments where we live undefended, more undefended than not, right? And how because I don't think trust grows from the absence of failure. It really grows from the presence of repair. And right? And because of that, because the presence of repair takes two people, that often then as a leader in my CEO fantasy world that I don't occupy, means that I have to lead the way of even vulnerability. I'm not creating cultures of vulnerability. I am in myself as a leader vulnerable. Right?
Yeah.
And so let me take this a step forward into my own environment as a pastor. Most people come to church, they don't really believe, or they question belief. They pay guys like me to believe, right? And so folks show up on a Sunday morning and we say the creed. And maybe somebody in the middle of that kind of raises their hand internally, but wonders about the virgin birth. But nobody's going to ask about that because we're Orthodox, or this is what it means to be Christian. Or these are the tenets of so nobody questions it. Why? Because they pay me to believe that. But if I raise my hand and say, actually, can we talk about some things? Then it shifts the dynamic of, I think it shifts the vulnerable set point to y'all do the work, I've got the answers, to actually, we have to work out our faith, as Paul said, with fear and trembling. And that's a really different space.
Trust doesn't grow from the absence of failure.
Right.
It grows from the presence of repair. That is so profound, and it's so critical. Matt, one of the things that, these business leaders we work with all the time, they talk about, and a lot of founder-led businesses that are trying to increase their value. And not only that, but to understand their value. And it also got me, deeply thinking, because one of the things we assess is like 11 drivers of personal trust. So that I have to establish a real and whole perspective on who I am as a developing person or leader. And that as I get that accurate assessment of that, and I share it with others, that my own sense of my own value increases.
Yes. Yeah, that's good.
And
Yeah.
so it's not just at the individual level, at the team level, what it means to increase value. And then of course, in a business level, these founders are looking like, what is my business worth? Because I looked up the Latin root of the word value.
Mm.
And it literally, valere means strength and worth. And it was fascinating, Matt, what you just mentioned, that one of the words that's emerged, valor, of course, courage, comes from valere, but also the word convalesce, which literally means to repair or rebuild.
That's great.
And what you just said tied that together for me, because I think about that the process of repair is a part of, and I know you're going to go off on the word process, I think, but it's like the actual process or system of repair is part of the trust proposition.
You can't have trust unless you screw trust up. Trust
and then begin the repair, like to work it, to repair it.
100%. That's hyperbole. I think that trust in the rupture repair cycle. This is basic attachment theory. This is like,
Let's go.
What it means to be a little human dude or dudette, and what it means to be a CEO is not far apart. The processes are the same. And so in really, really strong environments of attachment where rupture and repair is happening all the time, right? A lot of times what happens when a consciousness of suspicion sets in is you have rupture without repair, right?
Yeah.
When there's a high anxiety system, it is when there is the inability to truthfully talk about rupture. There's no rupture here, right? We are only talking about the positive things, but in an attachment relationship, you're going to have missteps. You're going to have rupture in that relationship. And attachment theory says that really it doesn't like trust doesn't come from perfection. It comes from the repair. I learned how to re-engage. I'm sorry, I missed that. I'm sorry, I hurt you. I misunderstood you, right? Trust increases because I think vulnerability opens the door to repair.
Oh my goodness. It actually has massive practical implications. Something that sounds deep that Matt and I are talking about has massive practical implications. If we could begin to see that the process of maintenance, of human development related to our performance, that the process of maintenance and repair is fundamental. That's within me, between me and you, and within our organizations. When we get to scale, that is the solution.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's so interesting, Matt, because in my book, I wrote about measures, because I think measures are, and by the way, the other word that comes out of valere is evaluate, which is to assess my strength and worth. So literally, that's why I like assessments. They give me a scaffolding for an honest conversation about who I am. Without it, I'd be kind of like, I don't know why the gutter's leaking. But until I get the ladder up there to figure it out, then I could go like, oh, because it rusted through, and now I got to figure out how to seal that up. But that assessment matters. But then that's why what we described it as, now you have an assessment, but now you also need to think. There's mindset issues, which I had to write about also, like how you think about this. And then the last part was the method. Like there's a methodology that you can put in place to increase vulnerability about things that are difficult to share. Because you mentioned something that I've thought about a lot, is that, and you use some different words for this, but that, in the words of C.S. Lewis or Paul, that so much of our life is veiled.
Yes.
And that as things get worse, we tend to hide, we default to hiding more and more.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then bad things happen in the dark. Right? Or that we're left to spend most of our energy figuring things out, as opposed to like just doing our job.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Whatever the job is, like whether it's a marriage or whether it's a life or a job,
Yeah. When you, to return to the percentage of 42% are in the jungle.
Yeah.
Right? Now that we're talking about this, I think the percentage has got to be higher. there's at least 10 or 20% opposed to lying on that thing. Because I think
Well,
really that's the work of what it means to become human, right?
yeah,
And I think
yeah.
one of the things that we fight against is this kind of actualized, self-sufficient, atomized human being, and then we call that the leader. But to cultivate a community where leadership emerges out of the fruits of people's gifts, out of them doing their own work, out of being
Mhm.
responsible, being summoned to what it means to be human, seems to be of ultimate concern if we're going to create things of value long term, not just to turn a profit. Any monkey with a wrench can turn a profit.
That's good. Tell me about this then, because one of the things I've seen happen that I'd be curious about whether you have seen this happen too. And I'm thinking about like the fundamental work that we do as we invite a person into and to see their story. And you've chosen, not, this is not all Matt is, because he's also a scientist and an empiricist, but he's also got this poetic side of, you've got that poetic side of this narrative piece of you. And one thing I've seen that happens that is our shared space is when I provide an invitation to come and see,
Yes.
come and see who you are
Yeah.
and to come and share.
Yeah.
And I put a methodology in place that allows that to occur. So we're intentional about creating the space for that to occur. That one of the things that I see occur in people, and I've been able to see it more obviously in leaders I've worked with who come from populations of people where it quite frankly is not okay for them to feel agency. You know what I mean? Out of their context,
Yes.
they have been cast into a certain space, and it's like it's only okay to feel something. But I've literally seen a young man change his posture in a chair because of a questioning process in him that he's never been invited to consider before.
Beautiful.
And so I'd love to know if you've seen that as well. Like I made me realize that this sense of my own worth, like it's one thing for me to tell you that God loves you. It's another thing for me to invite you to come and see how.
Yeah. Yeah.
But one thing that I sometimes we wrestle with, you called out like whether it's this young person or whether it's a CEO,
Yeah.
they actually share more than they think they do.
They are
Right?
summons to the same process
They've been
of
summoned to the
becoming
same
human.
the process of repair, as Matt Russell would
Yeah.
say. What's your take on the movement toward the paradox, as you know how I would describe it, between my own agency and humility? Sometimes what we see in the world is as people succeed, their agency turns into something else.
I've been reading this woman named Aviva Zornberg, who is a Hebrew scholar on Exodus. And one of the things she says that is often God's biggest problem is people's inability to see an alternative vision for the world. That people's they're so that people that succeed and then they take this agency that they have and just become like selfish bastards or whatever, that they accumulate the kind of wealth which creates more problems for other people than it does solutions, right?
Mm.
Is that you have then a person that has not been initiated. You have an uninitiated person into humanity. And I think what we have at the top now is a system that rewards people's uninitiated selfishness, their agency
Mm.
that has not been emerged out of a deep sense of their own, what you said earlier, humanity.
Yeah.
And so I think the work then is to once we have a new imagination for what the world could be, for who I am in it, for what it means to walk the road of trust and repair, right? Then success and failure are just two things that allow me to have an experience of attunement within a container of relationship where I am summoned to grow, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Both of those things are the same thing. The question is how I respond in the midst of that.
Matt, you're reminding me of a quote that a guy, another guest of ours and a friend of mine named Tom Nelson introduced me to. It was an Abraham Heschel quote.
Oh,
And he said, the principle to be kept in mind is to know what we see rather than to see what we know.
yes. Yes. We need to read more Heschel.
Yeah. What was the quote from the woman you just stated?
Oh, I'm not sure if it's the exact quote, but she talks about the fact that the problem that God most has in the redemption of people is their inability to see an alternative with an alternative imagination.
Wow.
So when you have been so formed by Egypt, by empire, by success, by the Pez dispensing capitalism that we exist in now, that when
Yeah.
you get to the top, whatever the top is, and you and I and most of our friends are at the top, we think still there's a top.
Yeah.
Instead of being involved in a world, if trust is to really do its work, it's not just to build better teams so the market share can increase. It's so that a revolution of humanity at its core can happen, that we become the survival not of the fittest, but of the nurtured.
Mm,
Right?
mm.
I think
Yeah.
that's where Darwin may have been right in the first part of evolution, but really the only way for humanity to continue on is not to become the survival of the fittest. We have to become the survival of the nurtured. We have to figure out what it means then to create contexts and organizations and churches and little league, softball and baseball leagues that are moving in that direction. So
Yeah.
that when a little kid becomes a CEO, he's not just learning then about what it means to be attuned to vulnerability and trust.
Mm,
He's watched men all along the way, women all along the way model that to him.
yeah.
And he didn't have to read it in a book or watch it on a Instagram reel because he's been nurtured in a community that is inviting collaboration, that has paced itself along really depthful ways of growing, whatever the measurements are.
Yeah. That's good. I think that's answered my next question, was around the polarization in our world that we see. It's hard to deny. There are a lot of factors that are taking us certain directions. I mean, this is such a cliche, but I think often about social media, and we've never lived in a time where everything is catered to all of us. So we're seeing what we agree with. That's a whole other conversation, Matt. But what you just described is actually not political.
No, it's
You know what I
human.
mean? Right. It transcends politics. It's not even, because it's not saying exactly how you do that, but it's
No.
saying it has to begin there.
Yes. I mean, I think the alternative vision is to see something, the world in an alternative way, and then to wonder, what is my responsibility? Right? I
Yeah.
mean, the
That's
first
right. That's right.
the first half of life asks you the question, what do you do? It's the question everyone has ever asked you at a cocktail party, right?
Mm,
If you are still really excited when people ask you that in the second half of life, you aren't there yet.
yeah.
Because I think somewhere along the line, the second half of life summons you with a different question, which is, what does my soul require of me?
Mm, mm,
And most leaders are trying to ask second half of life questions with first half of life productivity. And I think
mhm.
most founders that are trying to either give their corporation away or organization or mature it along are still asking first half of life questions. What do I do? What I do? What I do? And until I think the leader comes to the point where the question and the terrain shifts to what does my soul require of me? That's a different algorithm. That's a different set of questions.
Yeah. And then I would suggest, in my best thinking at this point, that once I move toward that question for the
Yeah.
rest of my life, now what I do matters much more deeply.
Oh, I think you're right. Yeah.
People will say, like, it's not about what you do, it's about who you are. And I'm like, good psychologists would say, actually, what we do does shape who we are. So
Yeah.
it's a two-way street.
It's the Heschel quote,
It is the
right?
Heschel quote.
I mean,
Yeah.
you're seeing it differently now.
Understand what I'm seeing. Yeah, is fascinating. Okay, I got one last question for you, Matt. Just to inspire this, because I'd love to know, from your standpoint of working with so many people from different kinds of populations. When I say different, I mean, I've always been jealous of you, Matt, because I'm like, I want to hang out with poets and breakdancers, like more, and be just a complete imposter that loves that stuff, but doesn't fully embrace I'm an artist, sometimes, even though you would say I am probably. But it's what have you seen, like, if trust is always relational and always between people, what are some of the practices or habits that you've seen help communities move from some suspicion or shame toward belonging, toward courage, and even toward individual and shared responsibility? I like, what are some of the things that you've seen that have begun to move that needle, or to have someone begin to look at the state of their soul, as part of this equation for what it means to move toward wholeness? Like, what have you seen that's worked?
That's a great question. I really, like, the thing I think about probably more than I should is communities. And I think about now the community that I'm starting to understand as a container. And it can even be, say, small group communities, right? And so, for an example, I'm involved in, and I've been in a small group of men from across the city of Houston for about 3 or 4 years. They're just, if you looked at us, it's a freak show of people. You've got CEOs of really large corporations, entrepreneurs, an 85-year-old dude who's on his way out, literally, folks that are in between jobs, that have lost jobs. And we have created a container. And I think that partly what in our atomized world, there's a necessity to give yourself to a container, a group of folks that can contain the uncontainable in your life.
Hmm.
And I think if that's the paradox that trust develops in, is that there has to be a container of safety. I have to be able to walk into my boss's office, and if I think I'm being evaluated, I'm going to put on a certain posture. If I feel like I'm being summoned into the depth of a relationship, of knowing and being known, that's going to set something else adrift as well, right? It's going to set something in motion. And so I think that what people are hungry for is a really deep space to belong in. And I think we have to solve that problem. I don't know if it's not the workplace's problem, but a societal problem, is that we need to create spaces of deep belonging. I think that's at the core of every human desire, comes out of belonging. Right? Every evaluation that happens in my workplace, if it's not in a vulnerable space, really is threatened to belonging. And if I want to belong more than anything else, I will lie to you in order to stay there. And so that's why I think you see the delta within the folks that are talking about stronghold organizations, but in their own life, they're like, I'm in the friggin' jungle, dude. It's, I don't know about you, and I think that's where we have to create containers where people can start to bear witness to the uncontainable in their life.
That is the final word.
We should just end it there. But Matt, we do want to give a chance for the people who are listening or watching to know how to connect with you. What's the best way for them to
I
connect?
don't want anybody connecting with me.
Okay, that's fair.
All the stuff I just said.
We won't tell anybody. We'll just publish it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Belonging.
You can get in touch with me through my email address. I'll give you my cell phone number if you want it. Seems like everybody has it.
Or a website. Maybe we could start with a website. That's kind of safe.
You can find me through chapelwood.org, where I'm a pastor on staff at a church, or at iconoclastartists.org, projectCURATE.org. Any one of those will get to me.
It's good.
And Matt, one last wild question. Are you in a season of accepting yourself or changing yourself?
That's a great question. I think there's no change without acceptance. And so I think for the last long while, I've been in a season of deep acceptance, radical acceptance of who I am in this world, which is just who I am. And then acceptance that there is an immense, crazy, cosmic love that accepts me. And out of that, I think I'll just make it today. So it's pretty good.
So rich. Thank you.
Thank y'all. So next
Thanks,
week, can I
Matt.
come back? Can we keep talking about this stuff?
Just keep going.
Rob,
Absolutely.
you're
Yeah.
freaking amazing. You are amazing. I hope you know that. Your friendship means the world to me, and what you're doing in this world, it's helping. You're changing the imagination of people.
Thanks, Matt.
So yeah, thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this Wild Conversation podcast. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform, and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.